name is Martina Fouquet. I'm a 2L at USC Gould School of Law, and I'm excited to interview Ambassador William Jones today.
Hey, tell me who you are and a little bit about your background so I know who I'm talking to.
I'm originally from South Florida, and I did my undergrad at Princeton University. I then also got my master's in creative writing at Rutgers. I also worked for some time at Sotheby's, and so now I'm in law school. I'm excited to speak with you. Where are you originally from, and how did your upbringing influence your legal career?
I was born May 2nd, 1928 at 1763 Citrus Street in Los Angeles, California. That's in the Lincoln Heights section of Los Angeles. We lived at my grandmother's house. We were the only Black family. I was the only little Black boy in my grammar school of 350 students. And I went to UCLA as a freshman and entered in September of 1945. The war ended in August. So at age 21, I had a scholarship to study at the University of Southampton in England for the summer. Had never left California. And when I got to New York, they picked me up, took me to the office of A. Philip Randolph, the great civil rights leader. And I went to meetings with him for 2 days, and he took me every place to meetings and met all the civil rights leaders. And it was a wonderful experience. And they took me and put me on the Queen Elizabeth, a huge passenger ship, the Queen Elizabeth, for Southampton. And there were 2 Blacks out of 6,000 on the ship. But it just happened. They put us both in the same cabin, obviously. But it just happened that the other Black was Dr. Benjamin Mays, who was president of Morehouse University, one of the leading Black intellectuals in the world, Dr. Benjamin Mays. And so I had the upper bunk and Dr. Mays had the lower bunk for 6.5 days. And I had wonderful conversation with him. Came back and went to law school. I decided I wanted to be a lawyer when I was in high school. And as I say, I had very good grades at UCLA, obviously, so I got in law school. And I was the only Black student in the entire school. And at the end of my first year, I had a 90 average, and they gave me a full scholarship for my second year and put me on the law review. In my third year, I was on the law review editorial board, and I ran for class vice president of the class of 1952, and I was elected class vice president. And the president dropped out, so I became president of my senior class of 52, the only Black student in the law school. And at graduation, I presided and read the names of my class as they each came up and got their diplomas. And 50 years later, we had a 50th reunion, and oh boy, we really had a great time. In fact, one of my classmates last year called me. He's 93 years old now. And he called me, said he just wanted to see if I was still alive. His name was Leon Mayer. And the Jewish law fraternity invited me to join, and I joined with those guys, and they were all smart, and all they did was play poker. They were great poker players. You know, I had wonderful feelings towards USC, and I got an award from them, which I have here. It's an outstanding alumni award. And I also donated money and did things for them and had the State Department send people there for training and that sort of thing. So anyway, and then I married my childhood sweetheart, Joanne, and she was outstanding in her own right. And they admitted her as a freshman full-time to Howard University Law School. She's 35 years old with 3 kids. And she passed the bar, and she had been parking her car in a garage next to the law school. And the garage dealers were so impressed that they all got together, and she represented all the Black gas station owners in all of Washington, D.C., and had an office on K Street until I got my orders to go overseas. And as a career Foreign Service officer, I had to go. And so the only thing she said meant she had to give up her practice. The only thing she said was, when do we leave?
What's your favorite memory from USC? You were president, you were vice president. Is there one particular memory of USC Law School that stands out to you?
I remember my classmates, and we had such good times together. And even after I graduated, we all went out together and had fun with our wives. And so I remember just having a good time with the students. And I also remember how Dean Elliott, the dean, was so nice to me and so fair to me. And that's what I remember most about USC Law School. And I did graduate work at the School of International Relations later on while I was practicing law too. I didn't get a master's, but I did the coursework for a master's because that's when I wanted to get into international relations. So anyway.
And so how did you start your law practice right out of law school? And then how did that transfer into your foreign service activity?
Yeah, well, I took the bar in October of 1952 and passed, and was admitted to practice in January 1st of 1953. And there was a black lawyer, his name was William R. Freeman, and he had also gone to USC Law School and had been practicing maybe 10 years. And he had a little office that was vacant. And he said, I'll rent you my office. And so I had a sign painter paint a sign, said William B. Jones, attorney at law. And I hung it out next to his sign and moved into his office. And I had, my family had lots of friends. And so they all, if they had any legal work at all, they came to me. And then I formed a relationship with the only black-owned automobile insurance company in California, Loyal Automobile Insurance Company. I had a very good law practice very soon, did very well, and practiced with Rex Freeman. Then I opened my own office, practiced alone for 2 years. And then classmates of mine at USC, they were all white guys. We had known each other, we liked each other, so let's form a law firm. It would be the only interracial law firm in all of Southern California. And we formed a firm, it was Valiant, Jones, and Camille. And we rented offices on prestigious Wilshire Boulevard. Then another very prominent Jewish lawyer joined the firm, it was Valiant, Sokol, Jones, and Camille. But since I had studied abroad, I joined the World Affairs Council in Los Angeles, became a distinguished member, and I volunteered to work with the State Department and entertain African visitors because the Cold War, all these new nations were forming in Africa, and they were afraid the communists were going to get them. And of course, they were afraid of prejudice here, so they wanted someone like me who knew his way around to entertain. Then John F. Kennedy became president, and we were fighting the Cold War with the Russians. And they looked at the career foreign service, 3,000 career officers, the smallest of all career services, but highly, highly selective. And they had 3 blacks out of 3,000. And they said, we just cannot have that. And so they decided they wanted to recruit blacks, and they came to me and they said, would you come into the State Department as a Foreign Service Reserve officer, grade 3 officer, which they all had equivalent military ranks, which would be equivalent to a colonel in the military, which was a nice position. And we will, post you as a Foreign Service Reserve officer. And they asked me would I like to take the examination, become career after I'd been there 2 years. And I said yes, so that was an oral examination. They waived the written examination. It was a 2-hour oral examination. I had to stand up before 4 senior officers and answer questions on my feet without looking at notes. And one of the questions I will always remember, this was the question: you are in the Foreign Service of the Soviet Union, and you are a senior officer in the Soviet Union Foreign Service. The Premier of Russia, Khrushchev, is going to take a round the world tour, and you have been assigned to brief him, and you are to brief the Premier of the Soviet Union on Soviet foreign policy in every country of the world. And so I said, where do you want me to start? And so I started. Of course, I didn't do them all. They stopped me after a while, but that was the type of question they asked me. And so that went on, and finally they stopped and were satisfied. And they passed me, and I became a career Foreign Service officer, and then moved up the ranks of the career Foreign Service. And it was the UNESCO office reported to me. And so my first assignment overseas, which was very, very good, I was chief of our mission to UNESCO in Paris. And I lived in a beautiful home at Rue de la Faisanderie in France. One of my top assignments was I was the US representative to preserve the monuments of ancient Egypt. So we would go to Egypt at least 2 or 3 times a year.
How did you come to become ambassador of Haiti, and how was that experience like in terms of your whole career in the Foreign Service?
My next career appointment was at the ambassadorial level. And since I'd served at Paris, it was a policy in the Foreign Service that then you would go to an underdeveloped country. And Haiti was considered the most underdeveloped country in the entire Western Hemisphere, with the Duvalier regime was in charge of the country, strict dictatorship. And it opened up and they said, you have been assigned as ambassador to Haiti. So I went to Haiti. And of course, I was the American embassy. We had all kinds of interests there. And there were a lot of Americans in Haiti who I had to look out for and protect. And the one incident happened, which it's nothing to laugh. It wasn't funny at the time, but we had because of Haiti was a fairly dangerous country. I had a very good Secret Service group who kept up with what was going on, and they came to me and said, you know that we have agents and we know everything that's going on. And he said, we think you should know that Fidel Castro has just landed a hit squad across the channel in Haiti. We're trying to find them. And they're coming here to get you. And they're going to kidnap you and hold you for $2 million ransom. And then they're going to shoot you in the back of the head and throw your body into the channel, into the ocean. And I said, well, what are you going to do to protect me? And so he said, well, we're going to do our best. We're going to give your bodyguard, who has a .38, we're going to give him a sawed-off shotgun. And we think you should go back to Washington. I said, no, I am not leaving post. I'm not going to let that SOB Castro run me out of my post. So they said, all right, then, but get out of town. And so they got me and my wife, and I think one of my kids was home from college, and moved me to a hotel about 50 miles from Port-au-Prince. But I stayed in Port-au-Prince and I continued to manage the embassy. I could do it by telephone and what have you, and commute back and forth. And anyway, that worked out. Eventually they caught those people. I don't know what they did to, but it was safe, and I was able to go back home to Port-au-Prince. The only other thing that happened to me was in Africa, in Tanzania. When I first joined the Foreign Service, I was assigned there on a temporary assignment. And the Africans were rioting against the English because of Ian Smith, the segregationist in southern Rhodesia. And they were attacking everything English and everything European. And since I was the only dark-skinned person in the American embassy, it was unanimously decided that I would go outside and mingle with the crowd to see if there was any communist involvement. So I put on some old clothes and walked out and mingled with the crowd. And, they were tearing up, trying to destroy the British ambassador's Rolls Royce and doing things like that. And then all of a sudden, the Tanzanian army comes out and surrounds the square with guns. And a senior officer gets up on a table or something and starts shouting Swahili. I don't know what he was saying. He was saying in Swahili, but he was saying disperse or else, I guess. Anyway, nobody dispersed. They were still shouting and screaming. And all of a sudden, 35 tear gas grenades are thrown into the middle of the crowd, and one of them landed 4 feet in front of me and went off. And I got tear gas everywhere in my eyes, my chest. All my clothes were covered with tear gas. And I ran. It took me days to get that stuff off of me.
So what advice would you have for law students today?
Well, I'd say the main thing in law is to take law seriously and pass the bar. That is the key, is to pass the bar. Then I would advise them to practice law for a while, to know what it is to be an attorney. And you can do that by joining a firm, or you can start your own firm. But in other words, practice law for a while and see if you like it or you don't like it, and see what opportunities there are. Then be very flexible, because other things may open up. And if you're in the top percentage of your class, you get offers from the top law firms, and then take one of those offers, because they pay very well. Of course, I was in the top 10% of my class at USC, and I was the only one who was not offered anything at the law firms. They offered all my friends jobs at the big law firms, but not me. So I hired a sign painter and painted William B. Jones, attorney at law, and found a black lawyer who had an empty office, and he rented it to me, and I hung my sign out, and that's what I did.
What also advice would you have for current legal practitioners, people who are maybe thinking about potentially also going into foreign service if they want?
Well, I've been out a long time. I don't know what's the situation in the foreign service now, so I really am not qualified to answer that. The only thing I can say is that the foreign service was absolutely fair to me, and my colleagues were all first rate, and I never had any problems of bias or anything like that in the career foreign service. And I would recommend it as a career, but you have to realize that you do have to serve overseas, and it may affect your marriage or your life. And as I say, I served overseas 7 years consecutively without a break. And of course, I happen to have been married to a woman who enjoyed it, but that's the only concern I would say. Other than that, the foreign service is a magnificent career, because you're dealing with diplomatic problems. It may be mundane, like passports or things like that, but you do get into issues of diplomacy, and you are involved at a very high level. There are no dumb diplomats in the world. And so you're dealing with very high level, well-trained people of all nationalities and races, and you will travel. So, and I've been to 63 countries, so that's wonderful for me.
But if there's anything you would like to tell us, anything that you felt that is important that you'd like to leave with USC alum and students?
Well, I can say that USC is a fine school. The law school, I was one of the best decisions I ever made. I was accepted at UCLA Law School and at USC Law School at the same class of 52. And I'd been to UCLA. I graduated from UCLA. UCLA Law School had just opened. It would have been the second or third class at UCLA. And I'd always wanted to go to USC Law School all my life. I don't know why, but I had. It was a first-rate school, and they treated me absolutely fairly. And I made lifelong friends. And that was, perhaps educationally, that was the best decision I ever made in my life.